Welcome to Free to Speak, the New Zealand Free Speech Union podcast. If you enjoy the show, subscribe for uncensored conversations and free speech news from New Zealand and beyond.
Kia ora and welcome to Free to Speak, the official podcast of the New Zealand Free Speech Union. I am your host, Dane Giroux, council member of the Free Speech Union, and joining me today is political commentator William McGimpsey. William, glad you could be here with us.
Thanks, Dane. It's good to be here. Good to talk to you on the podcast.
Great. So William and I have had our differences in the past, but that's okay. We might settle a few scores now or not, or get on like a house on fire, which tends to happen when people actually dialogue, I find. But we're going to talk about a piece that William recently wrote, which struck me because I feel a little bit victim to the sentiment expressed in this piece. So just take us through the piece. Give us a high, like your elevator pitch for it, William, and then I'll start sort of feeding back on what appealed to me in it.
Well, the piece is titled The Importance of Criticizing Your Radicals, and it's really responding to an idea that's been put out into the public discourse about not criticizing people to your right. So I'm kind of a right-wing guy, and I'm part of, conversations on the right about how we can advance what people on the right want to do. And this idea of not criticizing people to your right, where that's come from is there are many people who feel that mainstream conservatives, people in like the centre-right parties across the Western world, across this particularly the English-speaking world, the Anglosphere, that they've engaged in a technique or a practice of disavowing people to their right and attempting to sort of read them out of the conservative movement, censor them, blacklist them. And the critique of doing this is that this has weakened, not just, obviously it's weakened the more far-right elements, but that it's also weakened mainstream conservatism. It has resulted in it, reducing its support base, minimizing its support base, splitting the movement, creating internal divides, and moving left over time. And the people say that the reason over previous decades that we have moved the culture has moved to the left over a long period of time is because mainstream conservatives have engaged in this practice of attempting to appeal to the mainstream media and the mainstream institutions that don't share their values by repeatedly disavowing people to their right, and that has actually benefited the left. It has locked in left-wing values and resulted in this. So my piece responds to this idea, and I'm coming at this from the point of view of someone who wants free speech. The reason why never criticizing people to your right is bad is because you don't really have free speech, don't really have a completely open political discourse in that case. It means, it sort of deadens the political discourse. It means you can only criticize people to your left. A lot of the very important debates can't happen in that case. And we want debates to happen. So rather than the problem being conservatives consistently denouncing people to their right, which I agree that this is a problem, but really that's a feature, I think, of a deeper and more important problem. And the deeper and more important problem is that over, for this period of the last few decades, let's say it started in the 1960s, but that's probably not right, but you have to start somewhere, is that there has been a media and institutional control by people who have these broadly left-wing values. And the media, of course, has great power to decide the limits of the Overton window, what kind of speech is acceptable and what kind of speech is unacceptable. It can platform people with the speech it thinks is acceptable and deplatform people with the speech it thinks is unacceptable. And as a result of this, this has caused this mainstream media control and institutional control that left-wing people or people who broadly share left-wing values have. That really, I think, is the reason that conservative movements have opted for this policy of disavowing people to their right. They've done it for sort of practical political reasons. You can call it cowardice, but I mean, it's really just sort of standard political practice to try and appeal. If you don't do that often, that you have the mainstream media and the institutions coming after you, and it can be just easier, if perhaps a bit short term, to engage in that sort of behavior. So that's really a sort of overview. My argument for a really long period of time now on free speech has been that political correctness, calling different things racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, bigoted, far right, all these types of words, it's presented to us as if it's really about fighting hate or these more abstract things. But and there might be a degree of truth in that. But what also happens is that a lot of legitimate points of view get caught up in those politically correct censorship terms, and people aren't allowed to say them anymore as a result. And if you do, and this may be not such a big problem now, because I think there's been a lot of progress in tearing down political correctness or delegitimizing it to a certain extent, so people can have more of these difficult conversations now. I think Elon Musk's free speech policy on X has probably helped in this regard. But that's bad for a lot of reasons, and it's not just political. It affects broader society outside of politics. So if you think about the process of science, for example, people can't do science on human genetic differences, or they can't. It's difficult. It's difficult to get funding for it, and it's particularly difficult to talk about it openly. The famous geneticist James Watson, who died recently, he spoke publicly about human differences in IQ and what effects that might have on socioeconomic outcomes, and he was pilloried for it and sort of unpersoned as a result. And it's not a one-off thing. This sort of behavior is endemic, and I think that is drastically affecting not just politics in our society, but the way our broader society functions in terms of everyday life, in terms of science across all our institutions, what ordinary people who aren't political are doing. And there really has to be something done to address that. So this idea of not criticizing people to your right is a sort of a legitimate response, I think, to that problem. But what I'm trying to do is put a little tweak on that. And the little tweak is we shouldn't, denounce people. We shouldn't, engage in really harsh, vindictive behavior. We especially shouldn't engage in cancellation, cancel culture. But we should, it is good actually to engage critically with these views that are considered more radical or extreme, because people put these views on the table, not just for them to sit there austerely and no one ever talk about them. You actually want them to become part of the culture and the conversation. And so that's what I'm calling for, really. I'm calling for free, open, tolerant, constructive conversation of ideas, not denunciations, and not ignoring and not talking about extreme views either.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's good. You've laid it out really, really well. The reason why your piece really spoke to me is that I sort of feel like I am the left-wing guy who has only ever really criticized the left. I don't tend to criticize the right too much. I do at times, but the first political writer I ever engaged with when I was about 17 or 18 was George Orwell. And, I read most of Animal Farm and I got through 1984 eventually, but these weren't the books that really spoke to me. It was his political essays. Are you familiar with his political essays, George Orwell?
I think I may have read one or two of them, but not extensively.
Yeah, well, see, I think he's just absolutely incredible. And he used to take a lot of flack in his day for attacking the mainstream left. And writers like H.G. Wells, The War of the Worlds, like he was a big lefty, and where that often butt heads was over Hitler and the rise of fascism. So H.G. Wells would be, Hitler's a buffoon, we've got nothing to worry about. Churchill's a warmonger, just don't worry about him, he'll be cool, everything's going to be great. And Orwell was no, we're going to have to confront this character at some point. It's going to happen. But he was radically honest. One of the great books that he wrote that I think everyone should really read if they get a chance is Homage to Catalonia, where he's an idealistic socialist and he goes to fight the civil war in Spain, to fight Franco and the fascists, who were basically just the far right of the Catholic Church at the time. And he encounters Stalinism up close. And what happened is that all the left factions were actually devouring each other, with the Stalinist sides wanting to basically execute and cancel out everyone else. And it was really eye-opening. And I guess for him probably illustrated why it is so important that you criticize your own side, because he learned that there were some extremely nasty characters working within the left. So he's wanting to make the left better through critique. And I believe that would be your position too. You're wanting to make the right
Absolutely,
better.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's what he was doing. Now, where I would criticize you on this is that, and you know, you'll probably be able to help me here because you're going to know more about the whole ecosystem of the right. But I don't really believe there's a spectrum. I don't really believe we have, like, when I think about being on the left, if there was a spectrum, wouldn't that mean that I was closer to the woke left than I would be to a conservative? Like, I don't believe I am. I think that I'm a sort of workers-focused center leftist. And the center part of it is interesting because when people say centrist, what do they mean? Like, am I talking economics? Am I talking culture? The culture I was raised in South Auckland was very socially conservative. It was actually quite influenced by, well, you know, I mean, a lot of those families out there, including the Polynesian and Māori families, were naturally conservative, quite family orientated. Many had, you know, forms of religion. So I'm more radical on the economic side. I can live with social conservatism, but I tend to be quite radically progressive as you know, culturally. But then when you look at the ACT Party, they might be a little more radically liberal than me. So when you say I'm critiquing the person to that side or that side, are they on your sides? Or does a conservative completely stand alone from some of these people that you think are part of a larger collective?
Well, I think you're making an excellent point that I agree with. Like, to a large extent, the left-right spectrum is a construction, right? And it's overly simplistic. People can combine their political views in all sorts of different ways across all sorts of different, you know, domains of policy. You know, economic policy and social policy is a very simplistic sort of the political compass way of doing it. But I mean, politics is a lot more complicated even than that. So yes, I mean, I agree with this. But I mean, I'm also critical of the idea of moderation and radicalism. I critique that idea as well, because what is it? What is the sort of objective basis for an idea being moderate or radical? It just seems to be whatever is considered acceptable or within the Overton window at the time is
Well,
what's
you could say
considered
taste.
moderate.
You could say taste and aesthetics.
Well, it's. I mean, you're pointing to something that's real, which is that there's a great degree of subjectivity. When you talk about moderate and extreme in this way, and you endow these terms with sort of a power or you know, influence or importance, what you're doing is you're sort of privileging what the general culture thinks right now in a way that may or arguably may not be warranted. I mean, because things go on trends. If you look at fashion, for example, there's nothing. Does fashion, approach an objective ideal of good tailoring and physical beauty over time, or does it just sort of go round and round in circles and cycles with experiments and then coming back to something that's been before? It seems to me that fashion is sort of like that, and it's not really tending towards. If it was working in any sort of you know evolutionary sense, or if it was it was pulling towards something objective, fashion would improve over time. But I don't think we can really say that that's what's happening. And ideas are a little bit like that too. Um, they go around in circles. There are intellectual trends and intellectual fads. And should we really privilege what ordinary people think now? If you're the Catholic Church, for example, surely your opinion would be that rather than progress, what's happening in the morality of humankind is a regress, a fall away. I mean, people are becoming less religious across the Western world. So yes, I mean, what's radical and what's moderate? It's a construction. What's left and what's right is a construction. I think the real world's more complicated than that. I think that we probably agreed there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, like, if you're sort of wanting to gatekeep or protect a political movement or make it better, what are you making it better for? I think that's something to discuss as well, because it's like, I can have all these grand views of what Danger O thinks leftism should be. I would tend to think I have my finger on the pulse of the working class more than, say, a David Farrier or someone like that. I think I would, but I could still go out there and be quite shocked and surprised by reactions to some of the things I propose. Ultimately, if we're critiquing one side or the other, that can be happening in a bubble, really. What do the voters think? Are they being canvassed? We're not really canvassing them on X, even when I write my blogs and stuff. I'm not really canvassing voters. Not really. I'm talking to a very small group who may or may not agree with me, but it's happening within a political bubble in a way, and I think that's where political parties, find themselves getting big shocks, like Trumpism, because that they almost, there was a sense then that it's like, well, they'll follow us anywhere. These working poor, the Rust Belt types, they'll follow us anywhere. But I could even sense back then, I was watching his speeches in 2015, 2016, 2015 probably, and I was thinking, he sounds like a guy that would turn up to a union hall in Otahuhu when I was a kid. He was sounding left-wing. Everyone was calling him fascist, but he was actually sounding quite left-wing, and I knew that they were going to miss something, I'm not saying I predicted the win, because I didn't. I thought he wouldn't get there in the end. But I do worry sometimes when, we talk about critique for whose sake? Is it intellectual sport, or are we really trying to do what's right in terms of the vote? I mean, some of your ideas are quite radical, obviously, and I know we just talked about it being taste.
Well, I would sort of
But
dispute that. I mean, I think
yeah,
that my ideas are the normal ideas of, 50 or 60 years ago. I don't think there's anything too radical about that.
I know, but that's 50 or 60 years ago, where people had many different views. I mean, how tested are they, I guess is what I'm saying, beyond a relatively small circle? Like, how do you now take them into the public and really communicate them and test them? Like the way I would jokes around a table when I'm writing a comedy. Sometimes they work in my head, but then they settle out and it's like, it died. I'm putting a line through it, like how, because I guess ultimately it is the voters that are really going to decide what's moderate and what's radical.
Well, in terms of what I've been doing myself, I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office. What I'm doing is, first of all, I'm interested in public policy and I comment on it publicly. But there's something deeper than that, and it's that I'm addressing this problem that I sort of laid out at the beginning, where I think there's political correctness and the sort of the censorship and demonization and stigmatization of certain ideas that are deemed racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. I think that's having really negative consequences for our society. And so what I have been trying to do is to surface those stigmatized ideas and put them out into the public space and give them a fair hearing. And also trying to sort of explain and sort of break down political correctness as a censorship and stigmatizing phenomena. So that's really the reason I'm doing it. It's not some of these ideas, obviously, I think are correct. So, I mean, let's take race and IQ differences. Okay, so this is really important because a lot of sort of woke ideas, like the idea of systemic racism, institutional bias, institutional racism, those sort of ideas, they come out of the idea that everyone is basically equal. All these groups are basically equal, and they would achieve equal outcomes if things were fair. So the fact that they're not achieving equal outcomes, therefore, it must mean that there's some sort of unfairness baked into the system. And therefore, and that's what systemic racism is, So this whole woke idea of systemic racism, institutional bias, it's been allowed to flourish and take hold in our institutions because the truth of the matter that these racial groups are different. They have different average IQs, and given a fair playing field, some will achieve better socioeconomic outcomes on average as a result. That idea has been censored and purged from the public domain, and people who bring it up have been punished. They have lost their jobs.
It feels really impolite.
Yeah, so it's warped the politics, and it's resulted in really bad public policies being implemented as a result. So I'm trying to address that problem in what I do.
Well, two things there. I mean, I can't just let the IQ thing just pass by. But like for me, and I don't know enough about it. I haven't really looked into it. I feel culturally, I'm inclined to believe that there are predispositions to certain types of thought. I think being Jewish, there is a way of thinking sometimes, which is, we tend to question a bit more. We are a civic theology more than a supernatural theology. So a lot of it's about the boundaries of behavior and conduct in a society. We don't have the idea of being saved and grace, which is a different sort of foundation of thought. And sometimes there's an urge not to question so much, The redemption narrative is another one. We have the messianic idea, but I don't personally believe in it. I poke holes in it a lot. I just don't think there is redemption, So that really, I don't think there's redemption. I think that's a Hollywood film. That's not life, I think this stuff is, cyclic and just happens and goes on and on. So, but in terms of the IQ thing, and this is where I get a little bit sort of, like for me, take me, right? So carve me up into my parts. So I'd be ethnically probably only about an eighth or a quarter or less than a quarter Ashkenazi Jew, right? That's my father, through my father's side, right? Then I'm French Italian, but the French is more we were from Occitan, right? Then I've got Lithuanian in me, okay, and so Southern European, Ashkenazi Jew, Lithuanian. I think we may have some Indian, believe it or not. So who wins? You know what I'm saying? Like so many of us are mixed in everything. Like how do you even know? I mean, you might be thinking this is a stupid question, and that's fine, but how would you know what the race IQ thing is gonna work in me? How can you sort of pinpoint me? How could you pigeonhole me? How would that work?
Well, I don't know why I need to be pigeonholing you. I mean, the the point of pointing out that different races and IQs, different races have different average IQs, is so we can get rid of these negative public policies around systemic racism and
Do they explain everything? Because it's like mathematics. If you look at the difference between mathematics with men and women, right? You could say men are better mathematically, right? But mathematics isn't one idea. Like you have mathematics itself is broken into about 36 or 37 different sort of ideas, right? And there's variation within those ideas. It's an average that the men on average are gonna perform better. So I don't know whether that's, I mean, to me, it feels just as abstract, actually, as the other idea, which I do believe is abstract. I'm completely with you on that. The whole thing of systemic racism, I don't quite know. They've never been able to explain it. Not really, in terms of it's happening over there and there. That's what it is. Look, we can pick it up, we can hold it, we can touch it. There's no one's ever been able to do that. And I wonder if this is just as abstract, really.
well, I mean, no. I mean, this is it's a field of study in science.
But the averages.
Scientists study racial differences, just like they study the differences between different dog breeds or anything else. Humans are divided into a number of different racial groups, and then from there, ethnic groups, and then you can even have subcategories further down. These groups are identifiable through genetic testing, and you can ascribe a sort of average characteristics to members of that group. Englishmen tend to be different from Japanese in these types of ways. That doesn't mean that every Englishman is different from every Japanese person in that way.
But that's right. And we're dealing with individuals in society, aren't we?
But what you're doing there is you're making war on the idea of taxonomy and of dividing things into groups. All of human knowledge is based on dividing things into different categories and noting the general categories of the things in those groups. Trees, dogs, grass, birds. If we applied your way of thinking that everything is an individual to those, you wouldn't be able to assign any categories to anything. You wouldn't be able to have language, really. You wouldn't be able to have nouns. And so you couldn't really talk to each other or describe anything or do any sort of science.
Sure, but I think the potential. I mean, I'm kind of shit talking, man. So you've read up on the stuff more than me, so I'm trying to learn and work this out. Okay, so I'm not. There's no. I'm not driving to this big moment because I haven't done enough looking into this. But I would say you say trees or dogs. Like a human being has more potential for growth and mental expansion and everything than, say, a tree or a dog. So the averages may work and totally be there and be fine. I'm not disputing that. I just wonder how much it ultimately teaches us.
You're getting at this something sort of demeaning or limiting about using these categories with different types of units.
No, I'm not actually doing that.
You're not doing, okay, well, sorry, I don't want to accuse you of something and not.
No, it's cool, man. No, I don't think I am doing that. I'm just wondering because we know that, there's the nature idea, there's a nurture idea, but also, levels of education, different kinds of education. We're not all resistant to that. I don't think this average is going to win out all the time. The individual is always going to teach us more than the average will. I just wonder, does it at a level get as abstract and unhelpful as the systemic racist idea? That's all.
No, I think I mean, These are scientifically quantifiable things. Scientists do stuff on it. It's a field of knowledge, knowledge of
I'm
human
not saying it
differences.
doesn't exist.
It's important for understanding human society, and it's important for acting rationally within human society,
It's important for
in
finding averages, but how
particularly in fields like public policy. You can't do a sensible public policy without having a background knowledge of human differences across racial categories, sexual categories, and other categories, and then applying that to public policy challenges. If you refuse to, then you get absurdities like the systemic racism thing and the institutional bias thing and the wokeism thing in general. That's a good example of the things that can go wrong. Also, the transgender thing.
that's more pronounced. It's like a female boxer versus a male boxer. To me, it's like we're not talking about averages at that point.
Well, I think all the same. I think the same basic principle applies there. You can divide humans into different biological types, and the different biological types differ on average. But not all the individuals within those types are different in the way the average would suggest. So yeah, so women and men are different in the same way that black people and white people. Well, not in the same way, but black people and white people are different based on biology, and women and men are different also based on biology. So, and everyone, the trans movement reminded us of this. It sort of brought it into focus. We had decades of feminism that told us, that gender was mostly about what you were taught, that gender roles were taught, and it was considered a sort of a dirty thing or a low thing if you were to point out, innate biological differences.
I bet they regret that now.
Well, it turned around and it bit them, right? The trans movement showed, I think, women that that there are biological differences and that they are important, and they're not just that pointing out these biological differences. It isn't just important. It isn't just done by men to hold women down. The knowledge and incorporation of knowledge of biological differences into what you're doing is important for protecting women from men as well. And so, and men and women's sports is the obvious one here, but the men and the women's toilets as well. We need to understand that these differences exist in order to design policies, public policies, social policies, the way our society works in general, in order to protect women and help women and give women the type of society they need. And so it goes for men and women. Also, it goes for different racial and ethnic groups as well. We're not all the same, and that the types of public policies that work for one racial or ethnic group of people may not work the same way or as well for other ethnic or racial groups of people. And you have to take that into account. People who are some groups of people are more likely to commit crimes than others, more likely to commit violent crimes. You can demonstrate that statistically. What that means is, in order for them to achieve flourishing, they're going to need a harsher and more repressive legal system that punishes crime more and is harsher on crime in order to enable the bulk of the population to live in a crime-free society and flourish.
But then we're not in a democracy.
Exactly. Right? So this is my point. So if you
don't have them here, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you mix different types of people together, it creates the need to compromise between the type of laws and institutions that are conducive to this people's flourishing and the type of laws and institutions that are conducive to a different type of people's flourishing, meaning that neither group of people can really get the type of society that best suits them and enables them to flourish. It makes everyone worse off. And this isn't just, that's me explaining it from a theoretical point of view, but there's evidence in the literature from, I forget his name, about diversity literally destroying communities. So in diverse societies or communities, people tend not to do things together so much. So you think about a community, you go out and you have barbecues with your community, you go to bowling club. Robert Putnam's the guy's name, I just remembered it. So he famously did a study on bowling clubs, people going and doing, temp bowling together. And he used that as a stand-in for voluntary association in general. Like in, traditional conservative thinking, the existence of these community groups, voluntary associations, that was thought to be the essence of community. And what Putnam found is that, that those voluntary community groups had been declining in American society over a long period of time. So, the community was disintegrating. And he wanted to know why that was. And he did a bunch of studies, and he found that one of the things that was contributing to it was the increase in diversity. So racial, ethnic, various other types of diversity. In more diverse communities, people don't do things together anymore. And, when you really think about it, it's actually very intuitive. People don't do things together when they have less in common with one another.
That wasn't my upbringing. Like in South Auckland, I would say that there was more social activity, and it was more diverse. Like maybe it's the lower socioeconomic thing. I wonder if it's got to do with that, because if you're working with diverse, because I left school really, really young, like about 14 or 15. I was digging holes at Pacific Steel and stuff. And the crews I was on were really multicultural, but they were completely free speech. So everyone was just having cracks at each other and having a great old time, But this group was very social. And if I ever went to parties and stuff, we weren't really in cliques the way you're describing. I wonder if it's got to do with, are these people also working together? Are they just how close are the bonds in that community? Because in South Auckland, we were mixed up on the league field, mixed up on the process line at Massport, Panmure, all these places. I just wonder if it's got to do with, if there is an economic dimension to it, or what sort of neighborhoods is he looking at, maybe. Because like a lot of policymakers, I was talking to Annie about this the other day on another podcast, a lot of people writing the policy that you're talking about that you would critique, I would question whether they had multicultural backgrounds, because they clearly have a cynicism towards multiculturalism. Even Paul Spoonley, the sociologist, who I think is probably a lovely man, if you spoke to him one-on-one, he thinks we need speech laws because the demographics are changing. And I hear that and I think, well, that's a very cynical take on multiculturalism. He obviously believes that we need a quasi-police state in order to sort of get along. That wasn't my experience in
that's
South
the view
Auckland.
of Chris. Sorry to interrupt you. That's the
right.
view of Chris Minns, who's the Premier of New South Wales. He sort of said that explicitly. And it's created waves.
I bristled at that.
Well, good. I mean, I want free speech too. So, but I think that the analysis, the actual factual basis for it has something to it. We are seeing a demand for more hate speech laws and other types of, social repression, but maybe mild social repression, at least initially, in order to manage tensions in multicultural societies. And we're seeing that, in the UK, where, people are, reporting mean tweets to the police. You've got Starmer, they're just introduced a new definition of being mean to Islamic people.
Islamophobia.
I didn't say that the right way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And all sorts of other things. And in Australia too, like we've got we've seen this as well. They've passed a bunch of hate speech laws recently, banning various types of groups, and that's actually something I want to get to now. Is so there's a bloke called Joel Davis, who was a member of the National Socialist Network in Australia, whatever you think of that group, and he is in jail now, and the reason he's in jail is that he said that a sitting MP should be rhetorically raped for what you said, and I did look up what you said, but I can't quite.
That's the quote. He said rhetorically raped. He didn't say raped. He said rhetorically raped.
Now, that might not be a very nice thing to say, but it's not something that you should be in jail for. And I think that you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't think anyone should really go to jail for words unless it was a very clear, direct call for violence against people. But even then, I don't know. Like it would have to be very extreme for me. I sit on the absolutist end. What really got me about the piece that you sent, the newspaper article there, is I'm reading this and thinking, no, I wouldn't agree with this guy, obviously, and all that stuff. But then it said he was in prison when his first child was born?
Yeah, I read that as well.
Yeah, and then so I think to myself, okay, so he's gone to prison for words. He's missed the birth of his first child. This is, that's going to create just so much resentment and bitterness and hurt. I don't think it's solving any problem that they think that they're trying to solve. And I was going to say that just before we moved on to this. You said there is a call for more of these hate speech laws, because in England and all that kind of stuff. Just because there's a call for them, it doesn't mean that it is going to make society better. It's not going to make society better. And this is one of and Graham IHRA made the point too, actually. It's like if you're sending people to prison for words, prison can often mean, can often lead to generational trauma between parents and children. This isn't a small thing. You set it up with the prison for something like that. No. I mean, to me, I don't even know what the crime is. I wouldn't even have him dig a garden outside a rest home for that. What, I mean, the solution, if there was a solution to it, if you thought there needed to be a solution to it, sit across a table from the person, humanize each other, have a discussion that way.
Well, I agree. I think I'm glad that you said that. What I would like to propose, if I may be so bold, is a call to action to on behalf of, it's not really the New Zealand Free Speech Union's area, it's the Australian Free Speech Union's area. But I would like to see, I'd like to see a call to action for Free Speech Union, be it the New Zealand one, the Australian one, or any of them, to go into bat for Joel Davis, to kick up a bit of a fuss about it, to send some letters, to put something on social media about it. Because, and this is something that you agree with, but defending free speech means that you have to defend, your radicals, that some of the people that you may not disagree with, you may not like all the ways they go about things, but you have to stick up for them, and you have to defend their right to say what they're saying. And I think that's what needs to happen with Joel Davis. And I would invite the Free Speech Union to get involved and do something about it.
I have no problem with that. Like we have been commenting on Australia. I've actually recorded a podcast with a UN special rapporteur who looked at the Australian speech laws, and he sort of pulls them apart. I guess because it's overseas, we tend to speak a bit more generally about what's going on rather than cases. Like that can be a bit tough to do, because we could be doing it all over the world, But
well, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think the Free Speech Union is great, and it does great work. But I think this is a particular thing that probably more could be done about.
Yeah, the thing about Australia is, like, I can't see us going down that road. Maybe that might sound a bit frightening coming from a board member, but I think culturally. And I'm quite surprised by this, because I thought we would have fallen before Australia, but we haven't. We are holding on to. I think the line is a bit different for Kiwis, and I don't know where that came from. Because, like I said, I thought that Aussies would have fought this harder, but they're not.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on something. I mean, we have defended our free speech better in New Zealand than they have in Australia.
Yeah,
I don't know why that is, but I think there is something to that.
Well, Jacob Mishangama, when he came here, he's based in the States now. He was wandering around, he was looking, he was talking to people, shaking hands, and everything. And he said, look, New Zealand and America are kind of the outliers. Like, it's generally quite a healthy environment for speech here, comparative to what it could be. I mean, we are. I don't want that to sound like, therefore, I'm going to relax and sort of smoke a cigar this afternoon and just, take the weight off. I'm not going to. That's not what I'm saying. And I do believe that we did a lot to sort of, frighten the last Labor government about their speech laws. But,
yeah, and I would I think, a thank you and a well done is in order. I think Free Speech Union did great work there, so well done.
Only because we've got a lot of supporters. They're the ones. 5 or 6 people can't frighten the government, but like supporters can. That's the difference. Like it's having those people that are prepared to do the submissions and to feed back and write letters to MPs and just become aware. Just become aware of where the dangers are. But yeah, like these people aren't the ones that really want it. They're not going anywhere. They're still around, and so we're gonna, there's new fights every week. But no, I think we have held the line pretty well. But no, that's a terrible story about that young man, because he's a young guy. He's missed the birth of his child. And the thing with, look, he could be a racist. Racism shouldn't be illegal. I mean, and if you're beating the crap out of your curb stomping people, okay, that's different. It's violence and everything. But one of the really distressing aspects of their hate speech laws is the whole idea of any clubs that they deem hateful, they'll just ban. And and I think it comes down to one minister who's looking after it, but there's no appeal. You can't appeal it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there probably could be some things I'd say about that, but I just want to flip onto a different issue while we're talking about Australia, and that's
Okay.
I'll just apologise to you in advance,
Yeah.
because it's about the definition of anti-Semitism, and the reason this is important.
So you're an experienced podcaster. He's moving it along, aren't you?
Well,
you're taking
I never run the podcast. I just appear on them. But the definition of anti-Semitism, I've got kids coming back at 3
Yeah.
o'clock.
Oh, sure.
They're going to be
No,
they're going to be
go for your
all
life.
over the room.
All right. Yeah.
Maybe a wee bit after 3.
My kids are adults now, so
So anyway, like the definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition of anti-Semitism. I just wanted to go through that and point out some of the problems with it. The reason I want to do that is because in Australia now, they've had this a special envoy's report into anti-Semitism. It's they've got another a review, a royal commission or something into the Bondi attack, and the special envoy's report into anti-Semitism it wants to use the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition of anti-Semitism and imbue it with like official importance, legal importance, or at least quasi-legal importance, and use it to inform hate speech laws. They want to embed, teams of people across various institutions in Australian society in order to combat anti-Semitism.
That's exactly what happened in England. Was it Javed Khan? Was he the Conservative Minister of Justice at one point under Cameron? But he was saying operationally, it might not be official, but operationally, yeah, use the IHRA. I believe it was him.
So this definition needs to be critiqued for that reason, because it's going to be used in an official, legal, or quasi-legal capacity, and it can censor people. And the problem with it is it's incredibly overly broad. So I've got the tab open here. If you just bear with me, I'll just go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's several sort of bullet points here. And the first one is reasonable, but they get progressively less reasonable as you go down. So the first one says, the definition of anti-Semitism, point 1, is calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Now that point, I don't have any problem with that point, but as we carry on, they get less and less reasonable, I think. So second point, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such as the power of Jews as a collective, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, and other societal institutions. Now, what's ironic about that bullet point is that the anti-Semitism special envoy has recommended embedding special anti-Semitism groups into many of the institutions of Australian society, presumably to, gatekeep anti-Semitic behavior out of it. So it's not really a conspiracy when it's sort of, they're recommending something akin to that in their official thing.
And you put your finger on something. Your answer is the point, and as a point that I make all the time. This doesn't help us. It actually does, ironically, can affirm in many people's minds, people that may have been either on the fence or a bit suspicious about Jews, that there is a conspiracy to silence people. Let's go back a bit on the IHRA, because, and I think this is really important, the person that came up with them didn't come up with them to use them to censor people. He saw them as a research tool for identifying anti-Semitism, not for hate speech, just in study that he was doing, right? That's a bit different, isn't it? He was saying, okay, I've got a research team. How are we going to identify anti-Semitism? Well, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we can do this. He never foresaw it becoming law all over the world. You know what I mean? It was a research tool. So that's something to consider here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for pointing that out. I think that's a really good point, because when you're putting things into law for hate speech laws, you really have to think carefully about what's called and what's not. But the other thing about that second point, that Jews have influence or power, I mean, Jews, particularly Ashkenazi Jews, are a high IQ group, and they do tend to be overrepresented in the institutions and positions of power in the societies in which they live. So it's not really, you should be able to talk about that if that's the case, rather than censoring it. So point 3, accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. Now, what's crucial about that point is that accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real wrongdoing includes real wrongdoing. So this is really about noticing patterns of behavior. If a certain type of wrongdoing has been committed by Jews and people notice a pattern in that regard, it's considered anti-Semitic under this definition to
Is that
point
what
it
they're
out and
saying,
talk
or are
about
they
it.
saying if you blame it on, if you blame a real event or an imagined event? It's not saying if you rightly point out.
It's about attributing things that an individual does to the group as a whole. But I mean, all things that are done by individuals, and it's legitimate to make generalizations and to notice patterns of behavior.
Well,
I think.
some people are going to make those patterns. I've been having a back and forward with this guy on X for a while, and he follows. I know he follows you, and I know I'm not always civil, and you know that I'm not always civil, but he's pretty civil, so I'll engage with him. And I've had some interesting back and forwards with him. He got a German researcher to scold me at one point about Bolshevism, right? And his theory is that Jews were disproportionately represented there, and they were trying to say, therefore, it's sort of a Jewish thing, right? What I found interesting about it was everything else sort of fell away from the argument that they weren't considering communism or the ideology of communism or the context of Tsarist Russia or anything like that. They dismissed, even though they couldn't disprove, they didn't say it didn't happen, but they said, oh, let's put that over there about all the potluck, because they said that one of the first things that happened was, the Bolsheviks made anti-Semitism illegal. Well, there you go. And it's like, well, in those civil wars, 50,000 Jews died in pogroms from the anti-Bolshevik side, right? And socialism was meant to be a universalist idea. It's not surprising that they claimed at the time they wanted to get rid of all forms of racism. They were communists.
This is the debate we should be having, though, whether that is true or not. We shouldn't be having a debate about we shouldn't be censoring people for saying it. And
No. That's my point. No, we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But what I'm basically saying is, what I found interesting is, because they were so fixed on the Jewish idea of what was going on there, everything else sort of fell away until there were
well, I
only
mean, you'll get
Jews.
no argument from me there. Like, there are people who fixate on it,
Yeah.
and it does they attribute it to everything, and it does take
These
away
are
from other
complex
more
cultural
reasonable.
moments. But I mean, but it's a bit like someone like Tucker Carlson, right? Who I think is just getting worse and worse. Why you don't ban him, and why you wouldn't ban any of this stuff that you're talking about, is because, say he did a 3-hour podcast and 2 hours and 58 seconds of it was absolute garbage, but 2 seconds or a minute at the end or whatever had this amazing insight that could help humanity. Well, that justifies the whole podcast. We have to hang on to it, you know?
Yeah, and what I think Tucker is great, and what he does is he surfaces a number of people and thinkers and ideas that otherwise might not have been surfaced, might not have been
I know you
presented.
like him, and I don't know why.
But
I
they
think
might
you're
not have
smarter
been,
than I think you're smarter
but they
than
might
me.
not have been presented before a mainstream audience. But that doesn't mean that all the people he talks to have good ideas, or that all the ideas there are right. But it is good to put different perspectives that have been excluded before.
Is there a punk rock feel that, he's saying what can't be spoken or what couldn't be said before? Is that sort of taking over, rather than what he's saying is historically relevant and true? And because, like, just the other day, he was talking about Oswald Mosley and saying that he was the opposition in England and Churchill arrested him and he spent the war in prison. I mean, that just wasn't true. And that was so demonstrably untrue. Like, I don't know what you see in him.
You don't know what I see in Tucker and
No.
Well, I mean, I've explained it. I mean, he's talked to a lot of
But
people.
what about that I just said? I mean, he must, either he's not very smart, which I don't believe, or he thought, I'll package this so it sounds like this guy was the leader of the opposition and Churchill had imprisoned him.
I don't know I can't comment on it because I don't personally know the details of the
Look for
thing.
it. Yeah, it's a disturbing one, dude. It's not great.
But I mean, this is part of the debate, though. I mean, I would have thought that a free speech union would agree that part of what needs to be done is expand the Overton window. So the range. So you would agree that there has been, under political correctness for previous decades, there has been a range of ideas and perspectives that have been excluded from the mainstream, such that ordinary people don't believe in them, not because they've thought about them and they've had a chance to see that they're incorrect, but they've never been given the opportunity to even consider them because they're excluded from the mainstream. That isn't right. We need to get these perspectives into the mainstream and under critical examination.
Well, that's what I'm doing.
I agree with that.
I'm not cancelling him. Like I said to you, if there were 2 minutes of his podcast that had worth, I wouldn't cancel a 3-hour podcast. Like, because if you cancel anyone can hold truth, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can hold some truth. And therefore,
I don't understand the criticism that you're making there. Like, if you think it's good to get these stigmatized perspectives out into the public, and that's what he's doing, then isn't he doing a good thing? Like, what's the criticism?
No, he's not doing a good thing. He's doing a bad thing. The good thing would be someone challenging him now they're out there and going after them and going, this is why you're wrong. And by doing that, getting people interested in real history. And
I think both sides of that are good, aren't they? I mean, it's good to get devalued, suppressed and censored perspectives. It's good to give them the light of day, and it's good to have them critiqued.
But you're sort of, I wouldn't call this a perspective. I'd call this an untruth. like Oswald Mosley, and it's unfair because you haven't read what he said, but that he was ahead of the local the British Nazis.
People deliberately putting things that they know to be untrue into the public domain. We can say that there's an ethical problem with that, but it's so that that's deliberately spreading things that it's polluting the public space, but conflating that with putting ideas that that you don't know are untrue into the public space in order to like have them critically examined. That's a different sort of a thing. So lying is bad. Promoting lies, things that are lies, that's bad too. Yeah.
But I guess that the upside is if that and this is the Holocaust denial argument I use a bit, and I know people in the community differ with me on this, some of them. Like when Candace Owens was coming over, people were like, well, she's a Holocaust denier. And I said, well, we need to take her on. We need to spend the week she's here doing news, putting our facts on the table and everything. Oh, don't use it. Don't use it. Don't stoop to her level and all that stuff. And it's like, no, that's what we should do. Like if someone was to put anything out there that you thought was untrue and you had any sort of platform to correct it and you held on to knowledge, you have an obligation to share that knowledge and say this is untrue because you're not going to flip everyone on it, but it is going to open doors for some people, and I think that's important. That's what
to not do it is a sort of lost opportunity.
It's a lost opportunity.
Public education or public debate or an important issue. Yeah.
All of that. Yeah. Well, your children are going to be back any time, but this hour went very fast. I really enjoyed it. And we're going to have to do it again if you enjoyed it. I liked it. I don't know if he liked it. He'll tell me.
No, I did. It was very good. Great. You're a good podcast, Dan. Thank you.
Oh, nice. No, that's good. Well, there's a lot we could talk about, and we obviously agree on quite a few things. We have differences too, but we can talk about it, which is good. And it's always better when it's face to face. Even though this is virtual, it's close enough in the modern era, isn't it? So that's all good. Look, and I've said this to you in person when I met you down in Wellington, where I have a lot of respect for you is that you are prepared to put your name to what you say, and you're very, you don't play around. Like, I mean, I wouldn't even call you a provocateur. I think you're just sort of laying it out there as you see it. And, but the thing is, your name is to it. And that does take courage. And I think that needs to be, admired, because a lot of people, there's many people that might be inclined to say some of the things that you've said, but they do it behind an anonymous account. And I don't think people quite realize how much that, even though I know the risks of the modern era, it depowers your narrative, I think. I mean, would you agree? I think I understand why people gravitate towards the anonymous account, but I think it does rob you of some mana, actually.
I agree that there's more mana involved in doing things to your own name, to your own face, particularly when there's risk or cost involved with doing it. But anonymous accounts have value as well. They allow unpopular truths to be put out into the public arena that might otherwise not get out there because the person would be identified and punishment brought to bear on them. So they allow some, whistleblowers and things like that. Anonymous accounts are great for that sort of thing. But thank you for the compliments. Thank you for the kind words. Let me return them back to you. So you knew ahead of time that I was going to say critical things of Jews, and I was going to bring up Joel Davis on the program, and you were willing to have me on anyway. And so that, I think, is praiseworthy. So thank you for doing that.
No problem at all. I mean, I'm very clear that look, you could argue it's a selfish position. I believe hate speech laws can only hurt our community. I think they've really hurt the trans community. The trans community, for many, is associated with censorship now. And I know some trans people, and that's not who they are. The people I know are lovely people. But the people pushing for hate speech laws have really tarred a lot of these people very unfairly. So this is an existential threat to minorities. I honestly believe that. Good relations are important, but we don't want anything throwing up walls between us, which is exactly what they would be. So that would be my position on that.
No, I agree. And I think, in general, we live in a majority sort of British derived society. One of the great strengths of British culture, British society, the society that we are descended from, that we now inhabit, is it is probably to a higher level than perhaps any other society or culture in history. It fostered this ideal of free speech, of free and open conversation, and that has been part of our competitive advantage as a society. It has enabled us to make great scientific and technological breakthroughs, because we're prepared to go where no man has gone before. It has allowed us to have the most vibrant and dynamic sort of political culture. Has enabled great personal freedom. So I think that that's something valuable and worth protecting about our society.
Thank you for listening to Free to Speak. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and consider sharing the podcast with others. We release new episodes regularly, and subscribing is the easiest way to stay up to date. If you have any questions, feedback or suggestions, you can contact us at podcast@fsu.nz. If you want to find out more about the New Zealand Free Speech Union, visit fsu.nz.